Good morning. My name's Daniel Essery, and I've got the privilege of getting to interview some special guests here at the Cherry Blossom Festival, and who firsthand witnesses to World War II. And so, first going here is Robert Boeke, Louis Graziano, and both of these gentlemen served in World War II. Both of you were in the Army. And then we have Dorinda Nicholson, who is a first-hand witness to the bombing of Pearl Harbor in World War II. So, we're very grateful that you all could make it. And we're going to start with Dorinda and work our way down the line. And basically starting with World War II. And we're probably going to go to Robert next, and then finish up with Louis. Louis has written a book, and he has copies of it here, and that you can buy. And they have given me a sheet here. Softback is $12, a hardback is $29. So you all can purchase a book. A Patriot's Memoirs of World War II. There's the softback cover right there. So if you all are interested, pick one of those up before you leave. So we're going to start with Dorinda, and if you would, just kind of tell us how you came to be in Hawaii and at the time, and what growing up Hawaii was like, and then your kind of the experience of what you witnessed in the attack on December 7th.
Okay, I should be done in about 4 this afternoon.
That sounds great.
Aloha. You're bilingual? I know, that's why I love Marshville. It's the typical story. Beautiful Hawaiian hula dancer and cute army guy meet, fall in love, get married. And at that time, if you were to fly to Hawaii, you would come on these Pan-American it could take maybe 12 passengers, so maybe that's not jumbo. Passengers from California to Hawaii, landing on water that needs to be very calm, and that happens to be Pearl Harbor. So Pan American shared a part of Pearl Harbor that's huge, but there was a civilian part and there was a military part. So Mom was working for Pan American, could walk to work. We lived on a peninsula. There's the Pearl City Peninsula, and from 4th grade, you remember a peninsula surrounded on 3 sides by water. The waters of Pearl Harbor. So we moved there in early 1941, not knowing that we are going to have a front row, back row, side row seat to when America comes into war. So that morning, it was 7:30 or so, and Mom's in the kitchen doing breakfast, and in Hawaii that would be rice with some eggs and papaya. And we start hearing airplanes coming over, unusual because living in the middle of the harbor, we could see the Army and the Navy, and mostly Navy, and planes were not flying on Sunday mornings. And so, of course, if you're going to pick an attack time, you would pick a Sunday, and you would pick early before everyone is really up. So about 10 or 15 minutes later, the noise gets louder, and then our kitchen table literally starts to shake. So my dad runs out into the front yard. I'm right next to him. And when we look up, They are in their final descent. These are the torpedo bombers, and they have the canopies over their heads pushed back. And when the pilots would lean out, I saw the goggles on their eyes because they were just above our trees and just above our house on their way. So my dad grabs me. My brother was just 2, so he was still asleep, and puts us into the back of our 1939 Ford car, and we are trying to get away from the bombing. And we pass trucks with men still trying to get on, still pulling on pants, telling us to clear the road. And we leave the end of the peninsula and we go straight up to the closest hill, and that's where we then watch the second wave come in, and just miles and miles of oily black smoke with fire every once in a while coming out of that. Just as an aside, when 9/11 happened, I became a mental health therapist for 25 years to support my book writing habit. And we were having our clinical staff meeting when the second bomb went into the tower in New York, and I started having these kind of body memories. And then I realized that what I was feeling was back to being a little child, and the smoke, similar. The source of all of that smoke, high octane fuel that would have been in our ships that were in the airplanes, and then flashes of fire. And when you take and look at a battleship, if you can think of them as a tall building, so you burn this level and then you burn this level. So the Arizona burned for days and days and days after December the 7th. And if you remember in New York, the fire went for days and days, and even that weekend it rained, and still the fires went. So certainly that connection for me. When my dad's trying to get some kind of information, if only you had your Apple Watch, that would tell you, oh, it's the Japanese, and they're going to bomb for 2 hours. No information. So the radio comes on and it says, the announcer, all military report to your posts. Medical report to the nearest hospital to treat the wounded and the injured. The rest of you do not leave your house. No information on who it was, how many have been killed, and do not use, guess what? What would you not use? Your phone. No, that is only for emergencies. I remember one of my sons was attending Oklahoma City University during that bombing, and I wanted to call him and couldn't call him. So the telephones were just not for our use for the longest time. Later on that afternoon, the governor comes on and says that he has had contact with FDR. Hawaii is now under martial law. I didn't know as a kid what that meant. And I'm often asked, weren't you scared? I was scared the night of December 7th. Wanted to go home. I'd left my dog. I said to the army that came in, we're evacuating your area. You cannot go back of the unexploded shells and shrapnel. And so we're taking you to a sugar plantation town. and they will take care of you. That's why Pahu, if any of you are familiar with the islands, it's the next sugar plantation over from Pearl City. That night, sitting in the dark, and say you're all my neighbors, blackouts start immediately that night. You look towards Pearl Harbor, and it lights up. And we start telling each other the Japanese have come back. Do you know it took me 25 years to find the answer to that story? It was on serving on a panel with you wonderful service givers. The panel person said that gunfire going off at Pearl Harbor was friendly fire. And since I've made it my mission now to study certainly World War II for our students, I want them to know this story. The Enterprise luckily didn't get back. You know, the Japanese had 6 aircraft carriers. We had 1 working one. War wasn't supposed to happen in Hawaii. So Enterprise went to Midway, coming back, and gets a radio message, Pearl Harbor under attack. Admiral Halsey sends his airplanes off the deck. The last 6 are coming in. Request permission to land, sir. Permission denied. Request permission to land, sir. We're almost out of fuel. Permission denied. We do not know where the Japanese are. Turn around and go to Pearl Harbor. We shot 5 of them down. I got to meet the living survivor. Just to wrap, because I would keep you till 4:30. Just a bit of what it's like to be a child in Hawaii in World War II. I did do a book for National Geographic on what it's like to be a child in Germany, in Japan. Oh my gosh, the civilians and the children in Japan, all over the world. We were so blessed as Americans. Other than that 2 hours in my backyard, American civilians have escaped live bombing. And so I'm grateful for that. In fact, Nicholas, wherever you are, I think one program should be Children of World War II, and then we would have some of you there. No, we had curfews, you couldn't leave your house at night. The way food comes to Hawaii on big ships, we aren't going to get our Red Chief tablet or our pencils, no bubble gum. All these ships we were sending the women and children away. And if you were military, you had no choice. Your family is leaving. And then those ships would drop off the families evacuating Hawaii. And then here would come, I could tell an Army uniform, I could tell a Navy uniform, I could tell the Marines, I could tell the Coast Guard, because they filled our streets with these young boys. So living with bomb shelters, carrying a gas mask every way was the way of World War II and how it began on December the 7th, 1941.
Dorinda, how long after the bombing and you all had to go to the sugar plantation, was it before you could go back to your home?
We could go back in a week. And by then, it was declared safe to the casing. I think about this kind of laughing. We used a big bomb casing for a doorstop, not even realizing the significance of that. And we shouldn't have done that because somebody stole it right off our front porch.
Well, where your home was, stuck out on a peninsula, how close, they always talk about Battleship Row and where the Arizona went down. I've been there, I've seen it, been to the memorial. And they had the Oklahoma, which had capsized. How close could you see the Battleship Row from your home?
Actually, Battleship Row is on the opposite side of Ford Island. I was very close to the Utah, and a Japanese neighbor of mine was fishing down by the Utah. The Utah was the first ship to take hits that morning, because if the Enterprise had been in, that's what they were looking for. So the Utah took the first shells, and it was actually a practice ship. There weren't very many men on there. And what I'd like to say to all of you, most of you, when you go to Pearl Harbor, certainly you should visit the Arizona and the Missouri, of course. When I go to schools, like I talk about, and the ship that the treaty was signed on is, and then I said, I'm gonna lock the doors. Where was President Truman from? What other ship would he have chosen? What I want to say to you is, the Utah is the forgotten memorial. So when you go over to the Missouri, you will pass it. And I'm so sorry, the ship is still there. It's got a palm tree growing out of it. And it saddens me, because I've done interviews with men off of the Utah, and I've gone to their burials. It took the first shell that morning. Be sure also to go to the Missouri and the Pacific Aviation Museum.
So, what period of time did you have to leave with the rest of your family, other than your father? Did you have to leave Hawaii?
We were civilians.
Okay.
So I was not required. But my father, being from Missouri, I came with one suitcase a long time ago, and now I have this attic and basement and all those things filled. My father wanted me to go to Missouri, and I said, what? Where is that? No way am I leaving Hawaii and my Hawaiian mother and my hula and my culture. So I came here for college, and I met this cute guy.
I see. So, how long before life kind of saw some semblance of normality after December 7th? And of course they're at Pearl Harbor fixing ships, trying to save men, that some semblance of normalcy went back in your area there in Hawaii.
Well, our normalcy, I don't know, ever went back, but we accepted barbed wire everywhere. We accepted that we had to sit in our house in the dark. So my dad took black enamel and he painted the windows black so that we could turn on a flashlight. And then we'd even go into a closet to try to read. And then on our streets, we had civil defense wardens that would patrol his block every night so no lights were showing out. And in Hawaii, we wash our clothes on the back porch. Takes less room. So Mom was on the back porch with her flashlight trying to wash our clothes, and he came up and he said, Mrs. Stagner, I could have you arrested. And she told him off. So I don't know, in school, we had air raid drills, so we had to carry our gas mask everywhere. We didn't have school till February. I would reach under my desk and open my case and put my gas mask on and try to hold my breath as long as possible. And we even made games out of that. That just was normal. We couldn't go to downtown Honolulu. There's so many sad parts of war because it was filled with young boys in the beer taverns, a lot of them laying in the street, and the odor of being sick after too many beers. Prostitutes started coming to the islands. And And now the military Hawaii guards the back door of California and all of the Pacific Basin, and so important to our security that now the military is a huge presence in Hawaii and owns the most land.
So was your dad, did he ever have to ship out after?
My dad's job as a civilian postal worker, don't we as Americans love censorship? Love it, don't we? Every piece of mail, civilian or military, and this was my dad's division, was opened to check for sabotage. Oh my goodness, you said you saw a ship come in with soldiers, and he could black out those, or he could cut them into confetti. And then every piece of mail on the outside you wouldn't get unless it had a censored stamp on it that said it had been cleared. So that was his government job.
I see. Well, so something that kind of relates back, my grandfather, Essery, joined the Navy in World War II, as did, right after Pearl Harbor. And he became a carpenter's mate. And so he was actually sent to Pearl Harbor to work on ships that were still, they were trying to get, it took several years to get ships back up. And one thing that he always used to say whenever it would rain, because he could hear the loudspeaker from the Dole pineapple plant, is that they would announce there is no work in the pineapple fields today. And he would always, whenever it would rain and it was during the week and there's a construction job, he'd say there was no work in the pineapple fields today. But he always talked about that, that was one thing that he always held, of sights and sounds. And he talked about Wofax, was actually a restaurant and bar at the time that he always talked about. So.
It's funny how they can name the Pearl City Tavern or those places. The story of the pineapple fields, there weren't the workers right after the war, they all went off to war. So my high school, the senior class got picked up in the afternoons with trucks, and they would go work the pineapples.
Wow. That's
because the men were gone. Also, there was a huge influx of, like your family, to repair the ships. And if this had happened anywhere else in Hawaii, we would have lost all the ships. Hawaii, in order to even get the harbor ready, you have to dredge and dredge and dredge. So the harbor's not shallow. It's shallow, it's not deep. So the Oklahoma, we would have lost. So, and the other thing that we were doing so well in repairing, and I had a cousin who was working at Pearl Harbor, they started repairing the very next day with riveting. And of course, we all know the story of Rosie the Riveter. But we were able to repair the ships. The West Virginia sank with 6 torpedoes. I love that it was restored, and it was in Tokyo Bay, September the 2nd, 1945, to attend and be in the presence of the Missouri for the signing of the end of World War II.
Wow. Now, we could go on for hours. It's such an interesting story, and you have just so much information, you did research and stuff. If anybody wants to continue this conversation, you have written some books. Would you like to tell about those two real quick?
Really? The Arizona Memorial asked if I would write my story and they would publish it, and so I wrote my story, and then veterans started coming to me, still thinking of me, I guess do you think of me as a child, you guys? They started coming to me with their stories, so I started capturing them, and that became Pearl Harbor Warriors. And one of those stories became that was Pearl Harbor Child, my story. And then a Marine off the West Virginia had nightmares of his ship sinking, and a Japanese dive bomber pilot, the two of them become friends, and that became a Mark Twain book several years ago. And then the story of children around the world, survivors of World War II. And a story, Nicholas, where are you? Most people don't know that Mexico helped us in World War II. And I love the story of a school teacher that made the difference. FDR asks the president of Mexico to please send some soldiers, and he says, I can't, but I'll send you a squadron of pilots. So it's their story. And so when the Mexican troop is getting ready to leave, President Camacho thanks all of the Mexican men who have signed up. Is there anything I can do for you or your families while you are gone? Nobody spoke up, excuse me, except this teacher. And he says, El Presidente, I am a school teacher in my village has no school. We teach outdoors. When it rains, we have to cancel school. Please build my village a school. It will be done. And when they came back, they had a school. There are now 500 students attending that school. It's the only time in American military history that we had an airplane with the white star on the fuselage and the tail of the Mexican flag. Story that I want every Mexican child and American child to know that. And that's available on Amazon. The others, the first two, I just happen to have some with me.
Sounds great. Well, thank you very much, Dorinda. We're going to move to Robert Boeke. I'm saying that right.
Right.
And so I'm going to give you the microphone, and let's start with where you were born and your path into the Army and some anecdotes.
So I got a microphone over here?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
All right. Well, hi again to all of you. And some of you have heard me before. I've been here before and told you about some of my experiences. Can you hear me all right? Okay. Good. So anyway, one of the important things about going into the service is that you know that your whole life is going to be organized for you. You don't have to expect surprises because everything's going to be routine. Everything's going to go along about the same way it always has. So that's kind of reassuring to know that you've got your life all organized for you. So anyway, I grew up and born and raised in California and went to school out there. And when I was 17, war was underway. This is in 1940, early in 43, and had an opportunity to sign up for what they called the Army and Navy Specialized Training Program, where you could enlist in the service and you get a 4-year college education in 2 years. And so you'd work a little bit harder and so forth. So that sounded pretty good, so I signed up for it and took a test and found out I passed the test. So anyway, I thought, well, I'm all set now, it'll be a long time. So, I entered my first year of college in 1943, and I was in the first week, and all of a sudden a messenger comes from the Dean of Men's office and said, call your mother. So I called my mother. She said, you just got a notice from the weather department, and you report to duty next Monday. So, first change. So Monday I reported for duty, and they said, we're sending you to Stanford to get an education. So that's great. So I go to Stanford. I thought, well, boy, I'm set now for a couple of years now. I'll get my degree and I'll be all set. So I attended one semester at Stanford, took 27 units, which is quite a bit, you know, and had a great time in that 3 months period of time. And then at the end of 3 months, the Army came along and said, hey, things have changed. We've folded the program. So now you're going to Fort Benning, Georgia, to take infantry training as a private. So that's where I went then, took that training, came back, signed to the 86th Infantry Division and Louisiana. And so everything was all set again. So anyway, they sent us out to California to take amphibious training because we were going to be going into the South Pacific and we'd be invading islands and so forth. At least that's what they told us we were going to do. So I was in San Francisco a little bit later with my division, and I was actually on board ship to go to the South Pacific, and all of a sudden they stopped us and said, hey, go back to your camp at San Luis Obispo. We're going to give you different uniforms. And so I went back there, and they said, you're going to Europe. They want you in Europe now. So anyway, I get on a train to go to Camp Miles Standish in Boston by train. Great train, beautiful waitresses and so forth on the train and so forth. I mean, the Army really does it the right way, so it was real fun, you know, to have that great trip in a cattle car. And it really was a cattle car. I was used to taking, I think, 40 horses to go in the same car. But anyway, we accommodated it. So we got there. So anyway, then we were going to go on a convoy to Europe. And so anyway, we went aboard a ship called the USS Alexandria. And the Alexandria was a luxury liner in World War I. And when Germany lost the war, then the United States took over that ship. So here, many years later, they made it a troop transport. So we went on board, 15,000 of us, 86th Infantry Division on board the ship. So I thought, well, this will be great. I'll get to see the ocean and the sun and the ocean and the dolphins going alongside the ship. So anyway, we go aboard, we go down and down and down and down and down. Never did stop going down, it seemed like. And I thought, well, my gosh, the ocean must be way up there somewhere. So anyway, we had bunks. And here was bunk 1, here's bunk 2, here's bunk 3, here's bunk 4, and here's bunk 5. And there was roughly about that much distance between the bunks, just enough room for you to get in there. So anyway, we thought, well, this is great. So I thought, well, we'll have, fun to go outside and so forth. Well, all the way to Europe, never did get outside. Never saw the sun, never saw the ocean. All we saw was my fellow roommates in our bunks and so forth. And we'd go in procession to have our meals, but we never got outside. We'd have our meals and go back to our bunks again. So we played cards in the aisle in between the ship, in between the different bunks and so forth. Anyway, everything was very calm until all of a sudden submarines decided that it was time to start torpedoing our ships. So anyway, it was kind of interesting because there we were in the ship. We couldn't get outside. We were way down below the water level, and here were torpedoes, and we heard the sirens that they rang on the ship. We heard the explosions. We heard all kinds of things happening. But anyway, we finally got just off of Le Havre, and they said, well, we're going ashore now. Now this is a little bit after D-Day, because we were going to go to San Francisco, as I told you, and then even when they needed us in Europe, they set us on that train. So then we get off the ship. D-Day is over. This is a little bit later on. And so we go ashore, and I get in a convoy, and it's a truck, and we're in the truck. And we've only been about 2 miles or 3 miles from the Normandy area. And all of a sudden, we hear whistles and whistles over our head. Well, it turned out to be shells that coming in, aiming for us. So anyway, we jumped out of our truck, got in the ditch and so forth, and so forth. So anyway, we know that was the experience of ending up in Europe. So then we had different things happen to us. So pretty soon we were in France. I mean, we continued in France, and we were in Belgium, and we were with Simpson's 9th Army, and then pretty soon we were in Patton's 3rd Army, and then pretty soon we were in Clark's 7th Army. And you know, we always know that, you know, tomorrow's another day. So finally in the 7th Army, we're clear down in Austria, a little town called Moosdorf, just outside of Salzburg. And Salzburg is where Hitler's hideout was, up in the mountains. And I went up there and saw that after the war was over. Anyway, we were in Moosdorf, and all the environs around there, and all of a sudden they said, hey, you're not going to go into Vienna and take over Vienna because orders came down, you're not to leave. Stay right where you are. So we didn't know what was going on, and we found out that Roosevelt had made a deal with Joe Stalin that Russia was going to be able to come in and take over Berlin, take over Vienna, and other areas, and so forth. And U.S. troops and Canadian troops and English troops were to stop right where they were. So that's what happened. So May 8th, 1945, the war is over in Europe. So big relief for all of us. We're all through. So anyway, the first thing we know that we're going to leave for France. So we go to France. We get to France. We get aboard ship, and we get First Division back to the United States. Now I thought, well, that's strange that they wanted us to get back here so darn fast, and wonder why. Well, the wonder why is that we were going to go to the South Pacific, and we were supposed to fight the Japanese next. So next thing we know, we finish our short vacation at home, and we get aboard ship, and we head for the South Pacific. So on the way down to the South Pacific, we did stop, and we saw what was going on and had gone on in Hawaii and other places down there. And then we were going to land in Leyte. And then just about 2 days before we were to land in Leyte, the atom bombs were dropped. So that was the reason I'm still here today, is that we were going to be invading Japan. And if we invaded Japan, I doubt that I would be here today. So instead, we landed rather than Leyte, we landed in Luzon. So Luzon was pretty messy because the Japanese had just left. Things were kind of uncertain as far as what they were going to do with 15,000 of us. There was no place for us to stay. So they sent us out into a field east of Manila, and they told us that, you know, get your blankets out and sleep on the ground, and we'll get the engineers as soon as we can, and we'll fix up a place for you to stay. Well, that happened okay, but anyway, after a short time there, then the engineers arrived, and they built us a big, luxurious place for us to get a beer. And this huge, luxurious place was probably about, maybe 30 by 15 by 15. And there were only 15,000 of us that had to use this to get our beer. So anyway, we didn't have to wait in line very long to get our beer. But anyway, the Army was anxious to provide service for the military because they wanted us to eat and sleep right and so forth. So they said, well, look, there's no place for you to go. It's off limits for you to go into Manila because the liquor in there may be bad stuff. It may kill you. And as a matter of fact, it did kill a number of GIs who did go in and got some homemade liquor that was not made properly. So after a very short time, two other guys who I'd been with all through Europe, Sergeant York and Corporal Gross were my buddies. We'd been through all the war in Europe together. And they said, hey, look, there's no place for us to go. We've got this little tiny place to get a beer. Let's go see the colonel and see if we can get permission to open up a bar in closer to Manila where we can have the guys come in and get a drink and get out of the base. So we went to Colonel, and the Colonel said, hey, I think that's a good idea, but you got to make sure that those guys come in, that nobody, gets drunk. If they get drunk, have too much to drink, don't let them drive back to the base, which was about 15 miles away. you've got to keep them overnight and then take them back the next day. So we said, okay. So we rented a house in San Juan, just outside of Manila, and we opened it up. We sold liquor sold drinks for 15 cents for a drink. So that was, a lot of money back at that time, And somebody had to take care of buying the liquor, and so I was selected, the three of us, I was selected to go into town and find the place to get liquor for the guys. And we also had to find a jukebox, so we'd have some little music. And anyway, we fixed up a nice little place for us, and there in outside of Manila, and things were just going great. And that went on for about 60 days, maybe. And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call. And the phone call says, Boeke, they want to see you. Colonel wants to see you back at the base. So we go back to the base, and the Colonel says, hey, look, the first sergeant, he's a regular Army. He's finished 30 years, and they put him on a plane and sent him home. And we need a first sergeant in here. When I've been at PFC, and I finally made corporal, and so I finally made a buck sergeant. That's with 3 stripes here on the emblems on our sleeve, And they said, we want you to take over first sergeant of 341st Regiment. Well, with all of the attachments to the headquarters, that's over 600 men. And I was just 20 years old at this time. So I became the first sergeant of the 341st Regiment. That was kind of fun because it was a new experience for me. And there were all these guys out there in the division. These were the infantry people. These were the communications people. These were the medics. These were all the things attached to a regiment to keep the regiment going. And here's poor old Bob trying to figure out how to take care of all these guys and make sure that everything went according to stuff. So anyway, the bottom line is the Army, I'm sure in the Navy, and Marine Corps, Air Force, and so forth, you grow up fast in the service. You learn to adjust to what's coming along. So anyway, those are my little anecdotes, and I could go on and tell you about lots of anecdotes, but I thought I'd ask, say if you have some questions for me, or do you, Dan, have questions of me?
Well, so after you landed in France, how long was it before you all made it into Austria?
And Austria, well, roughly that would have been, we landed in France, that would be, D-Day was June 6th, 1944, and let's see, June 6th, 1945. My memory's slipping.
So,
Right. So anyway, it was about 6 months.
about 6 months.
6 months.
Before they shipped you back
Right.
to the United States
Right.
to
And
go
went
to the
South
Pacific
Pacific.
Theater.
Right. One thing I forgot to mention, that this beautiful ship we went to Europe on, the USS Alexandria, with 15,000 of us on board, and I told you we were torpedoed lots of times in our convoy. After we got disembarked from the ship, the ship turned around, and in the English Channel, it was sunk by torpedoes. So that was just after we got off of it, where we had gone through the same direction. So things happen,
Now, so the war in the Pacific ends with the Japanese surrender. How long were you in the Philippines before?
Too long.
Too long.
Actually, what they did was that there were so many millions of troops in the South Pacific, there was inadequate transportation to get us back. So it took months and months and months. They tried to fly people back, but there weren't enough airplanes available for that service, so it was all by troop ships going back, Liberty ships. And so the war was over in September of 1945, and it was April of 1946 before I got home. So
Wow.
all that long time over there. So Okay.
Now, after you returned home, did you stay in the Army? Did you
No.
get out?
No, when they made me first sergeant back there, they tried to talk me into signing up permanently for the Army. They wanted me to stay in, but I wanted to get back and finish my education and get a job and get back into my regular life. So I didn't stay in the Army. I came back and entered the University of Southern California with a government subsidy to help us go through college. And so that's what I did. I went through college. And it was during the time that I went through college that television became on the scene. And they had, at that time, television came out with a 7-inch screen. That was the size of the television in this would be 1949. Now, there was a television program that had just come on in the Los Angeles area, and there was a young lady whose name was Margaret Carey, who became Tinkerbell. And Margaret Carey had this variety program. She was a singer and a dancer, and she was very attractive. And I thought, well, I've got to meet that gal. So I thought, well, I'm looking for a job. I'll go apply to the television station and see if I can get a job there. And so I went in and talked with him, and the guy said, I don't know what kind of a future we have because television is brand new. So I can't tell you what kind of opportunities you have. And I said, well, I have to tell you, I do appreciate your offer of a job, and I'll think about it. I'm trying other places too to see if I can get a job, but I'd love to meet Margaret Carey. And he said, well, she'll due in here in about 20 minutes. So I waited around and I met Margaret Carey. Most of you know already the story that Margaret and I met at that time, and Margaret and I dated for the next 4 months, roughly, until she went to work for Disney as Tinkerbell, and I was transferred. I went to work for ExxonMobil, which wasn't ExxonMobil, it was Mobil at that time. And I went to work for them. They transferred me to San Francisco. We didn't see each other for 70 years. And after 70 years, I went to the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And Lewis and I met at that time, back on D-Day. He was there as part of the ceremony. We had President Trump there, we had President Macron there, and there were 35 of us back on the stage behind the podium, and in front of us were thousands of people. I don't know how many thousands, but there were a lot of people out there. And so anyway, when we were, as part of that trip, I was in Amsterdam. Am I talking too long? As part of that trip, I was in Amsterdam at the start of a tour to visit the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and I drove it by a toy store that said on a big emblem on there, it said, Tinkerbell Toys. And I talked to my friends who I'd gone over there with, and I said, did I tell you that I used to date Tinkerbell? And they said, no. And tell us about it. I said, well, she's on the internet, so look it up. I said, her stage name is Margaret Carey. So they did. They said, well, we'll send her a email saying that we're here with you in Amsterdam. And I said, well, that's fine, you can do that, but she won't remember me because we haven't been in touch for 70 years. So they went ahead and sent the message off to Margaret. And I knew her, by the way, at that time as Peggy rather than Margaret. But they sent the message off to her, and she came back right away with an email that said, I certainly do remember Bob. I'd love to see him. And I still have the bracelet he gave me from his fraternity 70 years ago. So you probably know that Margaret and I got married a little over almost 3 years ago now. And so there's that story.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you very much.
One question from here. One question. Bob, before breakfast you talked about the Japanese troops in the Philippines who didn't realize the war was over.
Yes.
Would you fill us in about that?
Yes. That was not much fun. I was in what they call the intelligence and reconnaissance operation. And this is where you go forward to find the enemy and radio back that here's the enemy and so forth. And doing that, well, you had to always be aware that somebody was going to take pot shots at you. So when we arrived in Manila, they told us that there were a lot of Japanese around north of Manila in the hills and mountains there who don't know the war is over. And they are killing GIs who go out and go around and so forth. And we got to find them. So that was the job that we had then, was to go out and find these Japanese that were in the hills and the mountains around Manila. That took us about 3 months to do that, but essentially we wanted to try and capture them, capture the Japanese, but the Japanese did not want to be captured. Either you shot them or you were shot. It was not much fun, I'll put it that way. So that took us about 3 months to what we did was clear out the Japanese that were still trying to fight a war.
Wow, amazing story.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much again, Bob. We're gonna go ahead and go to Luis Graziano, who witnessed the surrender of Germany in 1945. And if you would, Luis, start out kind of where you were born, where you grew up, and then your path into the Army, and what took you to Germany in 1945.
Right. Drafted at Fort Niagara, New York. And the first thing when I got in there, Captain come up and he says, "You gotta cut your mustache off." Well, that didn't make sense. But being a rookie, I went ahead and cut it off. And of course, when I left there, I grew it back on. And from there, they sent me to Fort Hood, Texas, for commando training. And from commando training, then I went to Fort Stewart for 4 weeks training. And from there, I was sent to New Jersey to go overseas. And before I got on the ship, I went to town and made a record for my father. And in that record, I put everything that we was going to do to Mussolini when I got there. And everything I said in that record came true, just like I said. I don't know, I must have been in my read. So, then when I got overseas, I was sent to Fort Camp Weston in England. And I was put in charge of utilities. I had to build some barracks and stuff, which I was good at. And we got them all built and trained some of the men for commando training. And then Major was put in charge of building the mess hall. And I was working under the Major. And he monkeyed about 3 weeks and couldn't get the thing going. So the general come up to him one day when I was out there with him, and I asked him, "How come you didn't get that going?" He says, "I'm figuring it out, Captain." Major looked at me, or the general looked at me, and he says, "Can you do it?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Can we step aside?" He says, "Okay, Major, you stay there." I says, "All right, General, let me use some of the German prisoners to work." He says, "You got it." So I went ahead and put them to work. We got that barracks built, and the Major got transferred out. And I was put in charge of all the city of Reims, France, with all the troops and all the buildings that we occupied. I got everything done that was supposed to be done. Then I was in charge of Eisenhower's Special Troop Command room where he had all the maps and stuff. And I took care of that room for Eisenhower. And I had to run special telephone lines out to his hideout. So my buddy and I, we did that and run the lines to his place and stayed there a couple of days and came back to the Little Red Schoolhouse where he had the war room. I was put in charge of that. And got everything done he wanted done. And,
So, you first ship out from the United States, you go to England. That's your first stop, correct? How long were you in England before going into Fortress Europe, into the mainland of Europe?
I think it was less than a year.
Less than a year. Okay, so when you head to Europe, when they ship you to Europe, where was the first place that you all landed? And then, did you go into France or Italy, or
I went to France.
You went to France? Okay,
From there,
and then from there,
we made the Omaha Beach invasion.
okay, you were at Omaha Beach. Okay, now
And
with what unit were you attached
I
when you
drove a gasoline truck off of the LST.
off the LSDs?
And the Germans up on top of the cliff shooting down at us. So when I got under the cliff, I got my flamethrower out. And I shot the flamethrower up and then put that on fire underneath and got rid of that machine gun.
Oh wow!
And then there was another gun. So I threw a flare up in the sky for the Navy. You know, and they got my message and they shot and got that gun out of the way.
So they hit them with naval artillery from the ships
Right.
of where they were going right there from your you putting up a flare.
So then the Rangers came in, and they were the first one to climb the cliff, which is 100 feet high.
Point to Hawk. I've actually been there and looked over that cliff, and it is amazing. The Rangers coming up right there. So you were there. So when you landed, how close were you to Point de Hawk? Right at the base of it, there at Omaha?
No,
The cliff itself, at Point de Hawk, where the cliffs were. How close were you to them?
the cliff was 100 feet high.
Okay, but when you landed on the beach, you were very close to that cliff where you landed.
I drove a gasoline truck off of the LST
I see.
onto the shore.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. So Point de Hawk basically was a set of cliffs overlooking the landing beaches. And there was Germans entrenched there. Artillery placed on that could actually look over the beach. And so the job of the Rangers were to scale these cliffs by rope, ladders, grapples, and then take it by force those emplacements. And it is just an amazing thing to see and to know somebody that was there at that base of that cliff. It is absolutely amazing. But it was a hard fought piece of Omaha.
And at that cliff, and then we fought all our way through St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
and from St. Louis on to Breeze.
So St. Lo, you moved from the beach to St.
We
Lo.
got up the cliff,
Okay.
fought our way through St. Louis.
Okay, so you all, and of course Normandy is famous for the hedgerows that are on both sides of a road, and where the Germans were notorious for hiding, putting guns, ambushes behind those hedgerows. So you were fighting through the hedgerows into St. Lo. From St. Lo, where did you all move to from there?
Fighting our way till we got to Reeves.
To Reims? Okay, okay. Now, you all bypassed Paris on your way there, correct? Okay. So from your breakout, of course, the breakout at Normandy, getting off the beach, how long of a time before you made St. Lo? Was that a day, 2 days? How long was that?
It took us at least 3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay. Wow,
Go through and work our way to Reams.
I see. So to Reims, it was 3 weeks? I see, okay. How long before you got to St. Lo and then to Reims, right there?
Oh, that was probably 4 or 5 days.
4 or 5 days. Wow, wow. So you were in an infantry unit,
Right.
okay, and then, so did you all have any armor tanks or anything else moving with you, or was it all just infantry?
We got tanks that followed us. I had 35 men with me.
Wow, wow,
And I was in charge of
I see.
tanks following us.
So how long was it before, from D-Day up until you all made it through France and you were knocking on Germany's doorstep, you know, basically ready to cross the Rhine? How long did that take? How long of a period was that? Yes, from Reims.
About 43 days, I think.
43 days. Wow. You all were moving fast. Yes. Wow. So, at that
Point of information,
uh-huh.
I was in a church observing the Germans on the opposite side of the Rhine,
Mm-hmm.
trying to evaluate the extent of the Germans on the other side. And I was in the cathedral, the top of the church, looking this way, and we've been trying to get across the Rhine roughly 180 miles, starting with the English, the Canadians, New Zealand, and so forth, down to the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get across all the Rhine. This is before we got across at Remagen,
Mm-hmm.
and I was scheduled to go across the next day in a rubber boat, 8 of us going across. And the previous 7 days, the guys had gone across, never came back. I never saw them again.
Oh my.
The Rhine was about almost a mile wide at that point in time. So I was on top of the cathedral, radioing back the extent to which we could see the Germans amassing on the other side of where we were. And all of a sudden, they apparently saw my flash of my binoculars, and they bombed the church that I was in. And this happened to be a Sunday, and I was in the church, and they bombed the church where I was. And I scrambled down, and everybody that was in the service down below scrambled out. Anyway, 2 days later, they were able to cross the Rhine at Remagen, the bridge of Remagen. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
I thought
no.
that was an interesting little.
Oh yes. Wow. So is that where you all that you crossed at Remagen? Is that correct? Remagen? Is that where you crossed the Rhine? Okay. Oh wow. Wow. So where were you at when Germany surrendered?
Well, I was at the Little Red Schoolhouse.
The Little Red Schoolhouse.
Eisenhower's war room.
Oh wow.
And I set the table up for the Germans where they go sit, the French and the British, Russians, all I had all that set up for them. And the Germans would sign, and all the rest of them signed first. And Eisenhower would be in the room with them. He was up the hall, 2 rooms up, because he was afraid in case they backed up and wouldn't sign it. So after they signed, I had to take them up to his room for him to talk to them, ask them if everything went all right and all that. And then he wouldn't shake hands with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so they clicked their heels together and he dismissed them.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. That is one of the most amazing things right there. It's just unfathomable to see that, to have that take place right there. So you actually carried the documents.
Right.
When they were signed, you carried them to Eisenhower himself. Wow, that is
I didn't
amazing.
hear any of what he just said. Because what you said was fascinating, we didn't hear it at all.
Okay, so Lewis was actually where it was, where he was at was where the armistice was signed, Germany surrendering. So the Germans, he had set up the table, the Germans, French, Russians, the Americans. General Eisenhower was not present in the room, am I correct? When it was signed by the Germans, then you took, once it was signed, up to his room, delivered them, and you brought the German officers with you, is that correct?
Right.
And brought it up there, and that's when he was present when they signed it, carried the documents, and watched them firsthand surrender to General Eisenhower. Wow. That's absolutely amazing. So, go ahead.
My husband was at Pearl Harbor
Oh, wow.
with the Army,
With the Army. Wow.
and the day they were bombed,
Yes.
the boys in the Army were all given guns and taken down to the beach expecting boats.
Mm-hmm.
They never come in.
My goodness.
So then he was sent back to the United States,
Uh-huh.
an island off of Washington, I don't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was sent to Fort Lewis, Washington,
Uh-huh.
where he took, Hawaii, he was under, what do you call them, searchlights.
Yes.
And he went off of that in the field artillery.
I gotcha.
Then he was sent to Washington.
Wow.
From there, from Washington, Fort Bragg, North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
where I was with him.
Uh-huh.
Then he went to Europe and he spent till the war was over in Europe.
Wow.
So
Wow.
he was
From
in the
start to
whole
finish. Wow. That is amazing.
Came back okay.
Wow.
And we were married 63 years.
Well, that is truly amazing. Lewis, from the point that Germany surrendered, how long was it that you stayed in Europe before you were brought back to the United States? And you'll have to put the microphone up. After they surrendered, yeah, you'll have to get the microphone. They're having trouble hearing you. You have to move it up a little bit.
Oh, before I went back to the United States.
Yes.
I don't know, it probably,
Not over a year then.
not quite a
No,
year.
so quite rapidly. Okay. So, I've told everybody about your book and about your experience. What's the other thing is, how old were you when you put what you had experienced into a book?
I was in my 20s, about 21, 22, something.
Uh-huh.
95.
Were you 95 years old? They're telling me when you wrote the book.
Oh, when I wrote the book.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
yeah.
Wow.
95.
Wow, I would have, at 25, I would have a tough time writing a book. But you did it at 95. Wow.
Well, what I did all the time I was in the service, any little thing that happened, I'd make a little note.
Yes.
Wow.
And I saved it. I put all the notes. So then when I went to write the book, I took the notes out and see what the notes said, and I wrote about that, kept doing that till we got the book.
Nice. Nice. Hey, that's great. That is great. Now, I would love to sit here. I could talk to you, all three of you, all day long. I could spend multiple hours with each one of you. But they are telling me that they're going to be getting something else coming in here. And so I'm going to have to wrap it up because I would just love to talk to you all day. But I know you have some of your books here for sale, and which I'm going to get one for myself here and probably for some other people. So I do appreciate all your all's time. I appreciate your gentleman's service. Thank you for sharing your story, Dorinda. It is amazing. So, and I want to thank all the other veterans that are here in the crowd. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Bob.